Picture a successful hunt in ancient Africa. Zebras, antelopes, enough meat to feed an entire village for weeks. But there's no freezer, no refrigerator, just the blazing sun and hungry predators waiting for the feast to spoil. How did these ingenious hunters turn abundance into long-term survival? In the vast savannas and forests of ancient Africa, hunters lived in a world of extremes. One day might bring the ultimate prize, a massive elephant providing over 3,000 pounds of meat, enough to feed an entire tribe for months. The next week could pass without a single successful hunt, leaving families to survive on gathered roots and whatever small game they could catch. This feast or famine reality made every successful hunt both a celebration and a race against time. A single buffalo could yield 400 pounds of fresh meat, while giraffes provided around 500 pounds of protein-rich sustenance. But here's what made these victories potentially devastating. In Africa's intense heat, meat begins spoiling within just 3-4 hours after the kill. Bacteria multiply rapidly in temperatures that regularly soar above 100 degrees, turning life-saving nutrition into dangerous poison. The stakes couldn't have been higher. When preservation failed, entire communities faced starvation. Children, elders, and nursing mothers depended on the hunter's ability not just to make the kill, but to make it last. Successful tribes understood a crucial truth. A hunter who could bring down an elephant but couldn't preserve the meat was ultimately less valuable than one who caught smaller game but never wasted a single piece. This harsh reality separated thriving communities from struggling ones. The most successful African tribes weren't necessarily the best hunters. They were the ones who mastered the delicate art of turning abundance into security. They developed intricate seasonal hunting patterns, timing their major hunts with optimal preservation conditions and community availability to process massive amounts of meat quickly. But turning a massive kill into lasting sustenance required more than just skill. It demanded an intimate understanding of Africa's unforgiving environment. Africa's diverse environments created a complex puzzle that hunters had to solve with every preservation attempt. From the steamy rainforests of the Congo Basin, where humidity levels reach 95%, to the bone-dry Kalahari Desert, where moisture disappears in minutes, each landscape demanded completely different strategies. Temperature extremes made preservation a constant battle against time. In the Sahel region, daytime temperatures regularly climbed to 115 degrees, while the humid coastal areas of West Africa maintained sweltering heat combined with moisture levels that prevent effective drying. Can you imagine trying to preserve meat when the air itself feels like a wet blanket? In these conditions, bacteria multiply every 20 minutes, turning fresh meat into a dangerous breeding ground for disease. The Congo Basin presented perhaps the greatest challenge: humidity levels so high that meat would actually absorb moisture from the air rather than losing it. Meanwhile, in the Ethiopian highlands, cool mornings could suddenly give way to scorching afternoons, creating unpredictable preservation conditions that caught even experienced hunters off guard. Beyond climate, an army of threats constantly attacked stored meat. Tsetse flies, army ants, and carrion beetles could destroy entire preservation efforts overnight. Hyenas, wild dogs, and even baboons learned to locate and raid human food stores. These scavengers possessed an incredible ability to detect the scent of preserved meat from miles away. Perhaps most devastating were the seasonal rains. The sudden arrival of the wet season could transform months of careful preservation work into mouldy, inedible waste within hours. Entire communities could lose their food security in a single unexpected downpour, making weather prediction a matter of survival. Faced with these environmental obstacles, hunters first turned to the most basic but essential preservation method: harnessing the power of the sun itself. The sun became ancient Africa's most reliable ally in the fight against spoilage. By removing 80 or 90% of a meat's moisture content, solar drying created an environment where harmful bacteria simply couldn't survive. This wasn't just luck. It was based on a fundamental principle that these hunters understood instinctively. Bacteria need water to multiply, and without it, they die. The key to successful sun drying lay in the preparation. Hunters learned to slice meat against the grain into strips no thicker than a 1/4 inch. Why this precise thickness? Thicker pieces retained moisture in their centres, creating pockets where bacteria could flourish even while the outside appeared dry. Thinner strips, however, dried completely and evenly. The drying process demanded both patience and vigilance. In optimal conditions, bright sunlight with steady airflow, properly cut strips would be ready in 2 to 4 days. But how could hunters tell when meat was truly dry? They developed simple tests. Properly dried meat should crack when bent, feel completely rigid, and show no signs of moisture when pressed firmly. Watch for warning signs became crucial during drying. Green or black spots indicated mold growth, while a sour smell meant bacterial contamination. Successful hunters learned to identify these problems early, salvaging what they could and discarding compromised pieces before contamination spread. Once perfectly dried, this preserved meat transformed into a storage marvel. When kept in dry, sealed containers away from insects and moisture, sun-dried meat could remain safe and nutritious for 6 to 12 months. Some hunters reported storage success lasting even longer in particularly arid climates. While basic sun-drying worked, experienced hunters discovered that strategic positioning and timing could dramatically improve their results. Master hunters understood that the difference between good and exceptional preservation lay in the details of placement and technique. They constructed elevated drying racks using sturdy branches, typically positioning them 3 to 4 feet off the ground. This height served 2 critical purposes. It maximized airflow circulation around the meat, while keeping it safely away from ground moisture, insects, and small scavengers. The timing of sun exposure required careful calculation. These experienced preservers learned to position their racks where meat would receive intense morning sunlight for rapid initial drying, then benefit from partial afternoon shade. Why this specific pattern? Direct afternoon sun in extreme heat could actually cook the outer layer of meat, creating a barrier that trapped moisture inside, exactly the opposite of what they wanted. Location selection went beyond just finding sunny spots. Smart hunters placed their drying operations well away from cooking fires and food preparation areas. Smoke contamination could ruin the preservation process and attract unwanted attention from predators drawn to the scent. The layering technique separated novices from experts. Instead of piling meat strips together, skilled hunters arranged them in single layers with gaps between each piece. This spacing allowed air to circulate completely around every strip, ensuring uniform drying. They learned to rotate each piece every 3 to 4 hours, checking for even colour changes and consistent texture development. Weather protection became an art form. Hunters developed quick deployment covers made from animal hides or large leaves that could shield drying meat from sudden rain or excessive heat. They learned to read cloud patterns and wind changes, adjusting their setups hours before weather turned threatening. However, in regions where intense sun could actually damage the meat or where consistent sunlight wasn't available, hunters developed an entirely different approach using fire. Fire offered hunters a sophisticated alternative that combined heat, smoke, and natural chemistry to preserve meat in ways the sun alone couldn't achieve. Smoking worked through a dual process. Controlled heat removed moisture, while smoke deposited antimicrobial compounds directly onto the meat's surface, creating a powerful preservation barrier. The technique split into 2 distinct methods, each serving different purposes. Cold smoking maintained temperatures below 90 degrees, slowly dehydrating meat over 24 to 48 hours without cooking it. This method produced meat that remained raw but could last for months. Hot smoking, operating between 120 to 180 degrees, partially cooked the meat while preserving it, creating a product ready to eat immediately. But what made smoke so effective beyond just heat? The answer lay in the natural compounds released when wood burned. These chemicals, including formaldehyde, phenols, and organic acids, acted as natural preservatives, penetrating the meat and creating an environment hostile to harmful bacteria. Building effective smoking structures required ingenuity with available materials. Hunters constructed simple frameworks using green branches, then covered them with animal hides or large leaves to trap smoke around the meat. The key was creating controlled airflow. Enough ventilation to prevent the fire from going out, but not so much that valuable smoke escaped. Temperature control demanded constant attention. Too much heat would cook the meat prematurely, while too little allowed bacterial growth. Experienced smokers learned to judge temperature by holding their hand near the meat. If they couldn't keep it there for more than 8 to 10 seconds, the heat was too intense. The success of smoking depended heavily on selecting the right type of wood, a choice that could mean the difference between perfectly preserved meat and a ruined batch. Wood selection became a science passed down through generations, with each type offering unique properties that could make or break a preservation effort. Acacia trees, abundant across much of Africa, produced a mild, sweet smoke, perfect for delicate meats like antelope and small game. The gentle flavour enhanced rather than overpowered the natural taste while providing excellent preservation qualities. For serious smoking operations, hunters prized hardwoods like ironwood and ebony. These dense woods burned slowly and steadily, maintaining consistent temperatures for the 12 to 48 hours required for proper smoking. Could anything be more frustrating than having your smoking fire die out halfway through the process? These reliable hardwoods prevented such disasters. Some trees offered bonus preservation power beyond basic smoking. The mopani tree, common in southern Africa, contained natural tannins in its smoke that acted as additional preservatives. Baobab wood released compounds that not only preserved meat, but also gave it a distinctive nutty flavour highly valued by certain tribes. The condition of the wood mattered enormously. Greenwood contained too much moisture, creating steam instead of proper smoke, and actually hindering the drying process. Dead wood that had been weathering too long burned too quickly and produced harsh, acrid smoke that made meat bitter and unpalatable. The ideal wood was seasoned but not ancient, dried for several months but still containing the right oils and compounds. Different regions developed preferences based on local availability. Coastal tribes favoured mangrove wood during dry seasons, while savanna hunters relied on drought-resistant acacia varieties. Master smokers learned to combine different woods, perhaps starting with fast-burning kindling, then switching to steady hardwoods for the main smoking period. Yet in areas where suitable wood was scarce or during times when fire posed too great a risk, hunters relied on a completely different preservation method, one that required a precious and sometimes rare resource. Salt represented one of Africa's most precious commodities, sometimes worth its weight in gold to hunters who understood its remarkable preservation power. This crystalline mineral worked through a process called osmosis, literally drawing moisture from meat cells while creating an environment so hostile that harmful bacteria couldn't survive. The type of salt made an enormous difference in preservation success. Coarse rock salt penetrated deep into meat fibres, while fine table salt often formed a surface crust that prevented proper penetration. Experienced hunters learned that coarse salt created the thorough preservation they needed for long-term storage. Africa's geography created dramatically different salt access across regions. The Sahara Desert contained vast salt mines at places like Tagaza, where pure rock salt could be harvested in massive blocks. Coastal communities had access to sea salt through evaporation techniques, while the famous salt lakes of the Ethiopian Rift Valley provided yet another source. For inland tribes, salt became a valuable trade commodity. Caravans carried salt hundreds of miles from coastal areas or desert mines, trading it for ivory, gold, and other regional products. Some communities built their entire economy around controlling salt trade routes, understanding that preservation meant survival for distant tribes. The application technique required precision. Hunters used approximately 1 pound of salt for every 3 pounds of meat, thoroughly coating each piece and pressing the salt deep into cuts and crevices. They learned to identify quality salt by its purity. The whiter and more uniform, the better the preservation properties. When properly salted and stored in dry containers, meat could remain safe and edible for over a year, making salt preservation the gold standard for long-term food security. For tribes without access to salt deposits or trade routes, resourceful hunters discovered that the remains of their own fires held surprising preservation power. What seemed like waste from a cooking fire actually contained powerful preservation chemicals that ingenious hunters learned to harness. Wood ash, particularly from hardwood fires, contains high concentrations of potassium carbonate, a natural compound with strong antimicrobial properties that could extend meat storage for weeks. The alkaline nature of ash created an environment completely hostile to bacteria and mold. Most harmful microorganisms thrive in neutral or acidic conditions, but the high pH level of wood ash, often reaching 10 or 11 on the pH scale, made survival impossible for these dangerous organisms. Not all ash provided equal preservation power. Hardwood ash from oak, ironwood, or acacia produced the most effective preservation compounds, while softwood ash proved much less reliable. How could hunters tell the difference? Quality hardwood ash appeared light grey or white and felt fine and powdery, while inferior ash looked darker and contained visible chunks of unburned material. The application process required careful technique. Hunters first sifted ash through woven grass screens to remove large particles and charcoal pieces. They then rubbed the fine ash thoroughly into dried or partially dried meat, ensuring complete coverage of every surface. The coating created a protective barrier that not only preserved the meat, but also deterred flies, ants, and other insects that could ruin stored food. Before consumption, the ash coating had to be completely washed or brushed away. While potassium carbonate wasn't harmful in small amounts, the gritty texture and bitter taste made thorough cleaning essential. Many hunters combined ash coating with other methods, applying ash after initial drying or smoking for enhanced protection. While ash provided external protection, some hunters preferred a method that created an impermeable barrier around their precious meat stores. Fat preservation created the ultimate barrier protection, literally sealing meat away from air, moisture, and bacteria in an impermeable coating. When hunters rendered animal fat and applied it while still warm, it hardened into a solid shell that prevented oxidation, the chemical process that turns fresh meat rancid and dangerous to eat. This method worked best during cooler seasons or in higher altitude regions where temperatures remained moderate. Why the temperature sensitivity? In extreme heat, fat coatings would melt and drip away, leaving meat exposed and vulnerable. But in proper conditions, fat-preserved meat could remain fresh and safe for 3 to 6 months. The type of animal fat made a significant difference in preservation success. Beef fat, particularly from wild buffalo, created the hardest, most durable coating. Antelope fat worked well for smaller pieces, while elephant fat, when available, provided exceptional preservation qualities due to its thick consistency and natural preservatives. Rendering fat required careful heat control. Hunters cut fat into small pieces and heated them slowly over low fires until the fat melted completely, but didn't burn. They strained out any meat particles, leaving pure, clean fat ready for application. The optimal temperature for coating was just above body temperature, warm enough to spread easily, but not so hot it would damage the meat. Proper coating meant completely covering every surface with a layer thick enough to prevent air contact. Hunters could tell when coating was complete by the uniform, glossy appearance, and the absence of any exposed meat. For storage, they kept fat-coated meat in cool shaded areas away from direct sunlight. Even the best coating methods needed additional protection from the elements, leading hunters to discover natural packaging solutions growing all around them. Nature Provisol provided hunters with perfect packaging material that grew abundantly across the African landscape. Large durable leaves that could wrap and protect preserved meat better than any manufactured container. These natural wrappers offered multiple layers of protection while being completely biodegradable and readily available. Banana leaves found in tropical regions became the gold standard for meat wrapping. Their broad surface area and waxy coating created an excellent moisture barrier, while their flexibility allowed for secure wrapping around irregularly shaped pieces. Palm fronds offered similar benefits in drier regions, with their tough fibrous structure providing additional puncture resistance. Baobab leaves brought unique advantages beyond basic protection. These leaves contained natural tannins that actually enhanced preservation by adding antimicrobial compounds to whatever they touched. When meat was wrapped in baobab leaves for extended periods, it absorbed these beneficial compounds, extending storage life even further. Preparation of leaves required specific techniques to maximize their protective qualities. Hunters learned to select leaves during certain times of day when moisture content was optimal. Too dry, and they would crack. Too moist, and they might promote spoilage. They often heated leaves briefly over fires to make them more pliable and to activate their natural preservative oils. The wrapping process itself became an art form. Successful hunters overlapped leaves to eliminate gaps, then secured packages with plant fibers or thin strips of hide. Proper wrapping created completely sealed packages that protected meat from insects, moisture, and contamination, while remaining portable for long journeys. However, hunters learned to avoid certain leaves entirely. Some contained toxic compounds that could contaminate meat, making careful plant identification a crucial survival skill. For the ultimate in preservation security, particularly during extreme weather or long-term storage needs, hunters literally took their food storage underground. Underground storage transformed the earth itself into a natural refrigerator, offering preservation conditions that surface methods simply couldn't match. Just 3 feet below ground, temperatures remained remarkably stable year-round, typically 10 to 15 degrees cooler than surface temperatures, and immune to the dramatic daily temperature swings that plagued above-ground storage. The earth provided multiple layers of protection simultaneously. Buried meat stayed safe from scavenging animals, protected from destructive weather, and insulated from the temperature extremes that could ruin months of preservation work. But could hunters really store meat underground for extended periods without spoilage? Site selection made the difference between success and disaster. Experienced hunters chose locations on slight slopes where water wouldn't collect, avoiding low-lying areas prone to flooding. They preferred spots with clay-rich soil, which provided natural moisture control and could be shaped into smooth-walled storage chambers. The digging process required specific techniques. Hunters excavated pits 4 to 6 feet deep and lined them with packed clay to create waterproof storage chambers. They often added layers of stones at the bottom for drainage, then lined the walls with large leaves or animal hides for additional moisture protection. Marking and remembering storage locations became crucial skills. Hunters used natural landmarks and created subtle markers that only they could recognize, avoiding obvious signs that might attract thieves or scavengers. They developed mental maps of multiple storage sites, spreading risk across several locations. When properly executed, underground storage could preserve meat for 6 to 18 months, creating an invaluable food reserve for communities facing extended hardships. The retrieval process required care to avoid contaminating remaining stores, often involving complete resealing of storage chambers. While each preservation method had its strengths, the most successful hunters discovered that combining multiple techniques created an almost foolproof system. Master hunters understood that no single preservation method could guarantee long-term food security. But combining techniques created preservation systems so effective, they seemed almost magical. By layering multiple barriers against spoilage, they achieved results that individual methods could never match alone. The most effective combinations followed specific sequences that maximized each method's strengths. A typical process began with initial sun drying to remove surface moisture, followed by smoking for flavor and antimicrobial protection, then salt application for deep preservation, and finally fat coating or leaf wrapping for external protection. Each step built upon the previous one, creating multiple defense layers. When executed perfectly, these combined methods could preserve meat for over 2 years, an almost unbelievable achievement without modern technology. Imagine having meat that remains safe and nutritious for multiple seasons, providing security through droughts, failed hunts, and other disasters. Different climate conditions demanded different combination strategies. In humid regions, hunters emphasized drying and smoking before applying protective coatings. In arid areas, they could skip some drying steps, but needed better moisture barriers. Coastal communities might emphasize salt combinations, while inland tribes relied more on smoking and fat preservation. Master preservers developed dozens of specialized combinations tailored for specific situations. They knew which sequences worked best for different animal types. The combination perfect for antelope might fail completely with water buffalo. They understood how seasonal timing affected each method and could adapt their approaches based on available resources. The complexity of these systems required careful time and resource management. Processing a large kill using multiple preservation methods could take weeks and demand precise coordination of materials, labour and timing. These sophisticated preservation systems couldn't exist in isolation. They required the collective knowledge and coordinated effort of entire communities. The entire village mobilised when a major hunt succeeded, transforming meat preservation from individual skill into coordinated community effort. Every person, from toddlers to grandparents, had specific roles that ensured no meat would be wasted and preservation knowledge would continue to the next generation. Elders served as the master teachers, demonstrating techniques through hands-on guidance rather than abstract instruction. Young hunters learned by watching experienced hands slice meat to perfect thickness, while children absorbed the timing and methods by participating in simpler tasks like gathering wood for smoking fires or collecting leaves for wrapping. The division of labour reflected both skill levels and physical capabilities. Men typically handled the initial butchering and heavy lifting, while women often specialised in the intricate work of salt application and leaf preparation. Children learned by performing supporting roles, turning meat on drying racks, maintaining smoking fires, or sorting different types of preservation materials. Knowledge transmission went far beyond simple demonstration. Communities embedded preservation wisdom into songs that made timing and techniques easier to remember. Ritual ceremonies around major preservation efforts reinforced proper methods while creating cultural meaning around the life-sustaining work. When preservation attempts failed, the entire community treated these failures as valuable learning experiences. Rather than assigning blame, experienced members analysed what went wrong and adjusted techniques for future efforts. These group discussions often led to innovations and improvements in traditional methods. Community protocols governed how preserved meat was shared during times of scarcity, ensuring fair distribution based on contribution to preservation efforts and family need. Seasonal preservation schedules coordinated the entire village's efforts around optimal timing for different techniques. This community knowledge had to adapt constantly as groups moved across Africa's diverse landscapes and through its changing seasons. Adapting traditional preservation knowledge to Africa's dramatically different environments required constant innovation and flexibility. What worked perfectly in one region could fail completely just a few hundred miles away, forcing communities to develop techniques specifically tailored to their unique challenges. Coastal tribes enjoyed abundant access to salt, but struggled with year-round humidity that made drying nearly impossible. They developed sophisticated salt curing methods, combined with elevated storage systems that kept preserved meat above moisture-laden coastal air. In contrast, inland Sahel communities perfected rapid sun-drying techniques that took advantage of their arid climate, but had to trade extensively for the salt their coastal neighbours took for granted. Desert dwellers like the Tuareg faced perhaps the greatest preservation challenges: extreme heat that could ruin meat in hours, scarce water that made cleaning difficult, and limited wood resources for smoking. They responded by developing ultra-rapid drying methods and portable preservation kits that could function with minimal resources. Forest communities in the Congo Basin dealt with the opposite problem: humidity levels so high that traditional drying became ineffective. They pioneered smoking techniques using special wood combinations that could dehydrate meat even in saturated air, while developing powerful, insect-repelling methods to protect their food stores. Altitude dramatically affected preservation success. Highland communities in Ethiopia and Kenya discovered that their cooler temperatures and thinner air created ideal conditions for extended drying, allowing them to preserve meat for much longer periods than lowland neighbours. Nomadic groups developed completely portable preservation systems. Lightweight smoking frames that collapsed for travel, concentrated salt mixtures, and quick-drying techniques that could preserve meat during brief stops in their seasonal migrations. All these varied and sophisticated techniques relied on an array of tools and storage containers that hunters crafted from their environment. The sophisticated preservation techniques developed across Africa demanded equally sophisticated tools and equipment, all crafted ingeniously from materials provided by the natural environment. The difference between successful and failed preservation often came down to the quality and appropriateness of these handmade implements. Drying racks formed the foundation of most preservation operations. Hunters constructed these from whatever strong, straight materials their region provided: bamboo poles in tropical areas, sturdy acacia branches in savannas, or iron-hard mopane wood in drier regions. The key was creating frameworks that could support heavy loads of meat while allowing maximum airflow circulation. Storage containers required different materials for different preservation methods. Dried gourds created airtight storage for salt-preserved meat, while specially treated animal hide bags provided portable storage for nomadic groups. Clay pots, shaped and fired by skilled potters, offered excellent protection from insects and moisture. Tightly woven grass baskets, when lined with leaves or animal fat, became surprisingly effective storage solutions. Cutting tools evolved dramatically over time and varied greatly between regions. Early stone blades, knapped from obsidian or flint, provided razor-sharp edges perfect for creating thin, even meat strips. Bone tools carved from large animals offered precision for detailed work. The arrival of iron technology revolutionized meat preservation. Iron knives could maintain sharp edges longer and create more consistent cuts. Different preservation methods demanded specialized equipment. Smoking operations required carefully designed ventilation systems and temperature control mechanisms. Salt preservation needed grinding tools for processing coarse salt and mixing implements for even distribution. Tool maintenance became a crucial skill in itself. A dull knife could ruin an entire preservation effort by creating uneven cuts that dried poorly. Successful hunters learned to sharpen, repair, and protect their preservation equipment, understanding that their survival depended as much on their tools as their techniques.